Have you ever looked at your savings and quietly wondered to yourself, will this really last me for the rest of my life? If that thought has ever crossed your mind, even for a moment, you are not alone. Retirement is supposed to be the time when we relax, enjoy what we've built, take that trip, spoil the grandkids a little, sleep in without guilt. But the reality for far too many seniors is that instead of enjoying their golden years, they're stressed, pinching pennies, worried the money's not going to last. And unfortunately, for millions, it doesn't. Did you know that more than half of retirees run out of money within just 10 years of retiring? 10 years. That means if you retire at 65, by the time you hit 75, you could be back to worrying about how to pay the bills, just when healthcare gets more expensive and energy gets harder to muster. But here's the thing. It's not because people are careless. It's not because they didn't save anything. It's because they weren't prepared for the real costs of retirement and made some very common, very human mistakes. In this video, I want to talk to you, like a friend, about some of those mistakes. The ones that drain savings faster than you expect. The ones that sneak up on you. And most importantly, how you can avoid them. So let's start with one of the biggest ones. And it's surprisingly simple. Underestimating how long retirement actually lasts. When we picture retirement, we often imagine 10 or 15 years of freedom. But people are living longer, much longer. If you're in your 60s today, chances are you'll live into your 80s, maybe even into your 90s. That's 25 or 30 years of retirement. That's a full second act of life. And yet many retirement plans are built around a much shorter timeline. I've talked to folks who saved just enough to cover 10 to 15 years comfortably. And then what? They're alive, but the money's gone. And Social Security. It helps, sure, but for most, it's not enough to live the way they want or the way they need. That's why one of the smartest things you can do, no matter your age, is take a long, honest look at how long you might live and what that could really cost. It's not about being afraid of aging. It's about preparing for it, so you don't have to stress when it happens. Now, another thing that drains retirement savings quicker than people expect is something we don't always like to talk about. Overspending in the early years. You retire. You feel free. No more commuting. No more alarm clocks. You get that fierce pension check or start drawing from your 401k, and it feels like, finally, I can enjoy my life. And you should. But what often happens is that people spend like they're still working. With that steady paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, they take the big trips, buy the new car, help their kids out. And before they know it, they've blown through a good chunk of their nest egg in the first few years. I knew a couple who retired at 62. They had $400,000 in savings and no mortgage. Sounds pretty good, right? But they traveled a lot, bought a new RV, helped their daughter with a down payment. By 70, they were down to less than $80,000. And suddenly, they had to make big lifestyle changes they weren't ready for. They weren't living with freedom anymore. They were living with fear. That's why pacing yourself financially is so important. Just like your energy changes as you age, so should your spending. Those early years of retirement are often the most active. So yes, enjoy them. But be mindful, because spending too fast in the beginning can leave you struggling later. Another reason many seniors go broke in retirement, not accounting for healthcare costs. And I don't mean just co-pays and prescriptions. I'm talking about long-term care, home health aides, or even assisted living. Here's something most people don't know. Medicare doesn't cover long-term care. So if you need help at home or have to move into a facility, that money's coming out of your pocket unless you've planned ahead. I had a friend, Helen, who was fiercely independent, lived alone into her 80s. But after a fall and a few hospital visits, she needed help. Her daughter moved in part-time, and they had to hire someone a few hours a day. That alone cost nearly $2,000 a month. And Helen didn't have long-term care insurance or savings set aside for that. Within a year, she had to sell her car, dip into emergency funds, and give up the little things that brought her joy. And that's not unusual. When we plan for retirement, we often think about housing, food, and travel. But healthcare is the wild card, and it's one of the biggest reasons retirees outlive their savings. So now that we've covered how underestimating retirement length, overspending early on, and ignoring healthcare costs can quietly eat through your savings, let's talk about something even more critical. Something that too many seniors fall into without even realizing it. I'm talking about helping family financially, at the expense of your own security. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with wanting to support your kids or grandkids. It's one of the most generous, loving instincts we have. We want to be there when they need us. And sometimes we feel like we should help, even when it hurts. But here's the hard truth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And too often, retirees are draining their own savings, dipping into retirement accounts, or even taking out loans just to help their adult children who are still getting on their feet. Maybe it's a car loan. Maybe it's a down payment. Maybe it's helping cover tuition or unexpected medical bills. And while those things come from a good place, they can chip away at the very financial stability you spent your life building. I knew a man, James, who had saved diligently for retirement. Nothing flashy, just careful budgeting. Smart choice. But over a 5-year period, he gave more than $100,000 to help his 2 adult sons during tough times. It wasn't all at once. It was a few thousand here, a check there. But by the time he hit 75, his savings were nearly gone, and one of his sons still wasn't back on his feet. James ended up moving into a smaller apartment, giving up his car, and relying solely on Social Security. His sons loved him dearly, but even they admitted later that they wished he'd drawn firmer boundaries. And that's the point. It's not about saying no to your family. It's about saying, not if it puts me at risk. Retirement is the one time in your life when your income is mostly fixed. Once it's gone, rebuilding isn't easy. So before you write that next check or co-sign that loan, take a breath. Ask yourself, will this help them short-term, but hurt me long-term? And if the answer is yes, it's okay to say so. Let's move on to something that's become more common and more dangerous in today's world. Not adjusting your investments after retirement. When you're in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s, taking some investment risks makes sense. You've got time to recover if the market dips. But once you're retired, that game changes completely. I can't tell you how many retirees I've talked to who left their money in high-risk stocks or aggressive funds without even realizing it. Why? Because it was performing well before. So they thought, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But then the market dipped. And unlike a 40-year-old who has time to wait it out, they needed that money now. And they had to sell at a loss. There was a woman, Linda, who had about $300,000 in her retirement account when she left her job at 67. She kept it invested the same way it had been during her working years, mostly in growth stocks. Then the market dropped, and her account lost nearly $70,000 in just a few months. That money wasn't on paper. It was what she needed to pay her bills. The lesson? Retirement is about preserving what you've built, not chasing big gains. That doesn't mean you have to pull everything out and hide it under a mattress, but it does mean rebalancing, getting advice, making sure your money works with your retirement plan, not against it. And while we're talking about protecting your money, here's another pitfall that sneaks up on a lot of retirees: inflation. It doesn't make headlines every day, but inflation is that slow leak in your financial tire. You don't always notice it right away, but over time, it can leave you stranded. What used to cost $100 a week in groceries now costs $130. Gas, utilities, prescription medications, it all adds up. And if your income stays flat while prices go up, you're slowly losing buying power every single year. And that's a dangerous trap for retirees who are living on fixed incomes. The trick here isn't to panic, it's to prepare. Build flexibility into your budget. Look at how your income adjusts over time. If you can, set aside a little cushion for those cost of living increases. And most importantly, don't assume today's prices are tomorrow's price. Retirement isn't static, it shifts just like life. And being aware of that shift, rather than getting blindsided by it, makes all the difference. We're not done yet. Next, we'll discuss the final traps, ones that catch even the most careful seniors. And we'll talk about the small but powerful decisions you can make right now to protect your financial future and keep your retirement stress-free, because the final traps we need to talk about are the ones that often feel harmless. They don't always look like financial mistakes on the surface, but they quietly chip away at your security until one day you're left wondering where it all went. Let's talk about housing. Specifically, staying in a home that no longer fits your financial reality. Now, I know this one can be a tough pill to swallow. Your home isn't just four walls and a roof. It's memories, milestones. It's the spot where your kids took their first steps, where birthdays were celebrated, where life was lived. So the idea of letting that go, it's emotional. And I get that. But here's what I've seen happen too many times. Someone retires, keeps the house because it's paid off, and thinks they're in the clear. But they forget about rising property taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, that leaky roof, that outdated heating system, the lawn that's getting harder to mow. The home becomes a money pit, or a stress pit, or both. I knew a woman named Carol, 74 years old, who loved her house, but between the cost of upkeep and heating, she was dipping into her savings every single month just to stay afloat. Eventually, she had to sell anyway, but by that time, the stress had already taken its toll. If you're in a home that's becoming a financial burden, or just too much to manage, it's not giving up to make a change. It's smart. It's strategic. And sometimes it's the key to making your retirement work. Downsizing doesn't have to mean less. It can mean less stress, less overhead, and more freedom. And while we're on the topic of freedom, let's talk about something that a lot of people avoid discussing until it's too late. Not having a plan for the unexpected. Emergencies happen, not just medical, although that's a big one, but also car repairs, family emergencies, or even something as simple as needing a new appliance. And if you don't have a cash cushion set aside, those surprise expenses can throw your whole budget out of balance. I know a couple who had everything mapped out perfectly on paper. Monthly budget, steady income, no debt. But when their furnace gave out during a cold snap, they didn't have an emergency fund. They had to use a high-interest credit card. And just like that, they were in a funnel of debt they couldn't easily shake. Having a few $1,000s set aside for true emergencies isn't just a luxury. It's peace of mind. It means you don't have to panic when life throws you a curveball. And it means you won't be forced into debt at a stage in life when getting out of it is harder than ever. And finally, let's talk about what might be the most important mistake of all: not asking for help. Too many seniors are trying to manage their entire retirement plan alone. And I get it. Asking for help with money can feel awkward. It can feel like admitting you've made a mistake, or like you're bothering your family. But here's the truth. Smart people ask questions. Smart people get guidance. Smart people recognize that retirement is new territory, and that navigating it shouldn't be something you do in isolation. Whether it's sitting down with a trusted financial advisor, talking to your adult children about your concerns, or even reaching out to your local senior center for resources, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. No one gets to retirement and just knows all the answers. It's a learning curve. And the people who stay financially stable, they are the ones who keep learning, keep adjusting, and keep asking the right questions. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by it all, if you've ever laid in bed at night wondering if your money will really last, it's okay. That worry is valid. But you're not stuck. You're not too late. And you're not alone. The key is awareness. The key is action. And the key is knowing that it's never too late to shift your path. Let's go back over this not as a recap, but as a reminder. You can avoid going broke in retirement by slowing your spending early on, by planning for the long haul, by preparing for healthcare costs, by setting boundaries with family, by protecting your investments, by adjusting your lifestyle when needed, and by building in flexibility. These aren't drastic changes, they are thoughtful ones. And they are decisions that give you control, stability, and yes, freedom. Remember, you've worked hard for your money. You've earned every single dollar. And you deserve a retirement that lets you breathe, rest, and live on your terms. Tell me in the comments, what's your biggest financial worry in retirement? I want to hear your story, because if you're feeling it, chances are someone else out there is too. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear this today. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because we talk about real-life money issues here. Not just numbers and charts, but the things that truly matter. Because at the end of the day, financial freedom isn't about having millions. It's about making smart, steady choices that give you peace of mind. And that, my friend, something you can control, starting right now.